Just stay there and enjoy the history, my son wrote on the back of a crumpled receipt, right before he boarded a plane with my passport in his pocket. He stranded me in Rome, thousands of miles from Ohio, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a plan to sell my life's work before I could get home. He thought the distance would finish me. He thought I was just a senile old man ready for the scrap heap. He forgot that I spent 40 years wrestling rusted steel and building engines from nothing. He forgot that I was a CB long before I was a father, and I was about to teach him that you don't strip a machine that's still running hot. If you're listening to this, hit that subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from. It helps to know I'm not just shouting into the void. Let me take you back to the moment the realization hit me. The air inside Terminal 3 was chemically cool, a sterile recycled draft that smelled of floor wax and duty-free perfume. It was an artificial climate designed to keep travelers moving, but I was burning up from the inside out. I sat on a bench made of polished, unforgiving wood, near Gate E31. My white dress shirt, which I had ironed with military precision in the hotel room that morning, was already damp. A bead of sweat traced the line of my spine. Cold and irritating, I rested my hands on my knees, staring at the knuckles. They were swollen, scarred, and permanently stained with the faint gray shadow of grease that no amount of Italian soap could scrub away. My knees throbbed, a deep, rhythmic ache that synchronized with my heartbeat. It wasn't just pain. It was a history lesson. It was the ghost of 40 years spent kneeling on freezing concrete floors in Ohio. It was the legacy of lifting transmission cases that weighed as much as a man, of wrestling rusted bolts until my tendons screamed. I had built Robert's auto and body from nothing but dirt, oil, and a terrifying amount of debt. I understood how things worked. I understood that if you didn't align the chassis perfectly, the car would eventually tear itself apart from the vibration. I just didn't realize that my own life had been misaligned for years. Now I was just an old man sitting on a bench in Italy, thousands of miles from my toolbox, feeling heavier than I ever had lifting an engine block. "Just wait here, Dad," Kevin had said 10 minutes ago. He had flashed that smile. It was a weapon, that smile. He had used it for 32 years. It was the smile that charmed his third-grade teacher out of a detention slip. It was the smile that made me forgive him when he took my vintage Mustang for a joyride and brought it back with a scratched fender. It was a smile that promised everything was going to be okay, even when the engine was knocking. He looked expensive. He was wearing a linen blazer that was the color of oatmeal and probably cost more than my first 3 cars combined. He looked like a man who belonged in a first-class lounge, not a man whose father had grease under his fingernails. "Ashley and I need to go to the VAT refund office," Kevin had explained, checking his watch, a heavy, flashy thing that looked too big for his wrist. "It's a mile-long line, Dad. You don't want to stand there on those bad knees." He pointed to my legs. He knew my weak spot. He knew exactly where the structural integrity was failing. "I'm fine, Kev," I had said, shifting my weight. The wood of the bench bit into my hip. "I can hold the bags. It makes me feel useful." No, absolutely not," Ashley chimed in. My daughter-in-law, a woman with eyes as sharp as a flathead screwdriver, and a laugh that sounded like glass breaking in a sink. She was tapping her manicured fingernails against the handle of her designer suitcase. Coots, tap, tap. It sounded like a ticking engine valve. A warning. "Security is tight, Robert," she said, her voice dripping with a patronizing sweetness she usually reserved for waiters. She was about to undertip. "We need to keep the bags with us. And your passport. Kevin needs it to verify the tax forms for the gifts we bought. You know how the Italians are with paperwork." I hesitated. My father, a man who survived the Depression by fixing farm equipment with baling wire, had a code. A man's passport is his life when he's abroad, Bobby. You lose that, you lose yourself. My hand hovered over my front pocket. The leather felt warm against my chest. It contained my identity, my return ticket, my wallet, my lifeline. I looked at Kevin, my boy, the kid I taught to throw a curveball in the backyard until the fireflies came out, the teenager who cried when he broke his arm, and who I held until he fell asleep. The man I had entrusted with the shop's finances while I took this retirement trip he had insisted upon. I looked for the deception in his eyes. I looked for the crack in the facade. But all I saw was my son. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding older than I felt. I pulled out the small leather pouch. I handed it over. I gave him everything. "Don't be long," I said, a sudden wave of vulnerability washing over me. "Flight board's in 45 minutes. "We'll be 20, tops," Kevin said. He squeezed my shoulder. His grip was firm, warm, reassuring, the grip of a man who had everything under control. "Relax, Dad. Get an espresso. You deserve it." He turned away. Ashley took his arm, leaning into him with a possessiveness that always made me feel like an intruder. They walked into the river of travelers. I watched them go. I waited for Kevin to look back. Just once. Just a wave. A nod. They didn't look back. They merged into the crowd and vanished like smoke in a draft. That was an hour ago. I checked my watch. It was a sturdy Timex Indigo I'd worn for a decade. It was scratched. The band was worn. But the movement was flawless. It never lost a second. 1:15 p.m. The flight to New York AZ-61 did. I could hear the announcements echoing off the high ceilings, a garbled mix of Italian and English that sounded frantic. I stood up. My knees popped. A loud, dry crack that sounded like a pistol shot in the noise of the terminal. Pain shot up my thighs, hot and sharp, but panic was a stronger stimulant. The terminal had transformed. It was no longer a place of transit. It was a chaotic sea of obstacles. Families arguing in rapid-fire Italian, backpackers sprawled on the floor, sleeping on their rucksacks, businessmen barking into phones, pacing like caged tigers. I felt small. I felt incredibly dangerously small. "Kevin," I called out. My voice was weak. It is swallowed instantly by the drone of the ventilation and the announcement system. I walked to the nearest information screen. The letters were bright yellow pixels against a stark black background, scrolling relentlessly. "Flight AZ-61 to New York, JFK. Boarding." Panic is a cold thing. People think it's hot, like anger, but it's not. It's ice. It started in my stomach and spread to my chest, pricking at my lungs like 1,000 needles. I limped toward the signage for the Varai office. It was on the other side of the terminal, a distance that felt like a marathon. I pushed past a group of tourists taking selfies, ignoring their annoyed glares. I ignored the fire in my legs. I forced my body to work, just like I forced an old engine to turn over on a cold morning. I have to find them. Maybe the line was longer than they thought. Maybe there was a problem with the receipts. I turned the corner, breathless, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The office was dark. A handwritten sign hung on the glass door, taped haphazardly. "Chiso per pranzo," closed for lunch. Back in an hour, the lights were off inside. The chairs were empty. The counters were bare. They weren't here. They had never been here. My stomach dropped like a stone falling down a well. The silence of the empty office roared in my ears. I spun around, scanning the crowd. Hundreds of faces streamed past me. Laughing faces, tired faces, bored faces. None of them mattered. "Kevin? Ashley?" I shouted. A few people turned to look, a momentary curiosity at the shouting old man, and then kept walking. I was just background noise. I was a glitch in their travel plans. "Where are you, son?" I ran, or I moved as fast as my stiff, grinding joints allowed. I headed back to gate E31. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. Please let him be at the gate. Please let this be a misunderstanding. Please let me be a foolish, worrying old man. The gate agent was closing the heavy glass door to the jet bridge. He was a tall man with a perfectly trimmed beard and a uniform that fit him without a wrinkle. He moved with the indifference of someone who did this 100 times a day. "Wait," I yelled, waving my hand. "Wait." I reached the podium, gasping for air, leaning my weight on the laminate counter to keep from collapsing. My son, Kevin Miller. "Is he on there?" The agent frowned. He stopped his work and looked at me. He didn't see a father. He didn't see a business owner. He saw a sweating, wrinkled old man in a damp shirt, creating a disturbance. "Ticket, sir?" the agent asked, his voice flat. "I don't have it," I gasped. My chest felt tight. "He has it. He has my passport." "Did he board? Please, you have to tell me." The agent sighed, a microscopic expression of annoyance. He typed on his keyboard. Click, click. The sound was incredibly loud, like a hammer hitting a coffin nail. Kevin Miller and Ashley Miller, the agent said, reading from the screen. Yes. They boarded 20 minutes ago. Seat 4A and 4B. He looked over his shoulder at the tunnel behind him. The cabin door is closed, sir. The plane is pushing back from the gate. There is nothing I can do. And Robert? Robert Miller? I asked, my voice trembling. That's me. I'm supposed to be in 4C. He looked at the screen again. Then he looked up at me. His eyes held a flicker of something new. Confusion? Pity? It was the look you give a dog that's been left tied to a lamppost in the rain. Sir, the agent said slowly, articulating every syllable. That ticket was canceled yesterday. Canceled? The word came out as a whisper, a puff of air with no sound behind it. No, that's a mistake. We had dinner last night. We had pasta carbonara. We toasted to the trip. We laughed. He laughed. Refunded, the agent said, pointing to a line on his screen. I couldn't see. To the Visa card ending in 492. The world stopped spinning. The noise of the airport, the announcements, the chatter, the wheelie bags, faded into a dull, high-pitched ring, like tinnitus. The Visa ending in 4092. That was the company card, the emergency-only card. The one I had given Kevin access to 3 months ago, just in case something happened to me. He planned this. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was engineering. This was a controlled demolition. I stepped back. My legs turned to water. I collapsed onto a nearby plastic seat, the impact jarring my spine. He fed me, my son, my blood, the boy whose diapers I changed, the man I taught to shave, the man I was leaving my legacy to. He had flown home. He had left me in a foreign country. No ID, no money, no phone, no way out. Why? I put my head in my hands. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt like it was wrapped in iron bands, tightening with every second. We had disagreements. Sure, every father and son does. He wanted to modernize. He wanted to sell the shop to a franchise chain, Apex Auto.
I wanted to keep it family-owned. I wanted the name Miller to mean something in Ohio. But this wasn't a disagreement. This wasn't a generational gap. This was an execution. I sat there staring at the floor, watching the polished shoes of strangers walk past me. I was debris. I was scrap metal. Then I felt something crinkle in my shirt pocket. I reached in with a shaking hand. It was a receipt from the coffee shop where Kevin had bought me a muffin 2 hours ago. Here, Dad, blueberry, your favorite. I smoothed it out on my knee. There was writing on the back, Kevin's handwriting. Angular, frantic. The letters dug deep into the paper. Dad, I didn't want to do this, but you gave me no choice. You're stubborn. You're holding on to the past. The shop is a gold mine, but you're treating it like a hobby. The investors gave me a deadline. By the time you get back, the sale will be finalized. I have the power of attorney you signed for your hip surgery last year. You never revoked it. Don't try to follow us. You have no resources. You're an old man. Just stay there. Enjoy the history. It's your fault. You forced my hand. Kevin. I stared at the words until they blurred into black smears. It's your fault. He blamed me. He stranded me, stripped me of my identity, stole my life's work, and he had the audacity to blame me. The shock began to recede. In its place, something else began to rise. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't grief. It was heat. It was the heat of an engine redlining. It was the heat of friction when metal grinds against metal. I looked up. A security guard was watching me from across the walkway. He saw an old man in a wrinkled shirt, looking devastated. He probably thought I was senile, lost, a problem to be solved. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness anymore. I wasn't senile. I wasn't helpless. I was Robert Miller. I could strip a V8 engine and put it back together blindfolded. I knew how things worked. I knew how things broke. And most importantly, I knew how to fix them. Kevin thought he had broken me. He thought he had scrapped the old parts. He was wrong. I reached down to my right shoe. It was a heavy work boot. I never traveled in sneakers. Support, I always told Kevin. You needed a foundation.
I unlaced it. I pulled out the phone and soul. Underneath, wrapped in a plastic sandwich bag to keep it dry, were 10 $100 bills. Always have a backup, my father had told me, tapping the side of his head, because engines fail, belts snap, and people lie. I held the cash in my hand. It was warm from my body heat. I put the money in my pocket. I stood up. I smoothed my shirt. I looked at the gate where the plane had just departed. I wasn't going to die in Rome. I wasn't going to fade away. I was going to teach my son a lesson about structural integrity. I walked out of the airport and into a wall of heat. The Italian sun wasn't romantic. It was an interrogation lamp, blinding and relentless. I ignored the line of white taxis snaking along the curb. Taxis meant credit cards. Credit cards meant paper trails. And if I paid cash, a Roman taxi driver would spot a desperate American tourist from 50 yards away and bleed him dry. I couldn't afford to be a tourist anymore. I was a fugitive in a linen shirt. I found the bus station. I squeezed onto a shuttle headed for Roma Termini, the central train station. I stood near the back, gripping the overhead strap. My knees screamed with every pothole, the vibration traveling up my legs like a stress fracture, spreading through a chassis. I didn't look at the Colosseum as we passed it. I didn't look at the ancient ruins or the grand piazzas. I looked for the cracks in the city, the places where the mortar was crumbling, the shadows where people disappeared. I got off at Termini. It was a gritty, chaotic hive. The air smelled of diesel exhaust, frying oil, and urine. This wasn't the Rome on the postcards. This was the engine room, dirty, loud, and dangerous. I walked 3 blocks away from the main tourist drag, down a side street where the graffiti was less artistic and more territorial. I found a hostel with a faded sign, Pincio Luna. The lobby was a narrow hallway that smelled of bleach and stale cigarette smoke, the universal scent of transient desperation. I walked to the counter. The clerk was a young man, barely 20, with tattoos climbing up his neck like ivy choking a tree. He was hunched over a smartphone, watching a soccer game. He flicked his eyes up at me. He took in the sweat-stained dress shirt, the lack of luggage, the exhausted posture. "Passport?" he asked, bored. I reached into my pocket. My hand brushed the warm roll of cash. "No passport," I said, my voice steady. "No receipt." I peeled off a single $100 bill and placed it on the scratched wood of the counter. Benjamin Franklin stared up at him. The clerk paused. He looked at the money. Then he looked at me. He evaluated the risk versus the reward in a split second. He swiped the bill with a magician's speed. He slid a heavy brass key across the counter. "Room 4, he said. "Second floor. Don't make noise. No guests." His name tag said Marco. "I need to use a computer," I said. Privately. Marco jerked his chin toward the door. "Internet Point. 3 blocks down. Next to the kebab shop. They don't ask questions either. First L I found. Bought and paid for. The Internet Cafe. The Internet Cafe was a cave. The windows were blacked out. The only light came from the blue glow of 24 monitors. It was filled with teenagers playing violent video games, their faces slack, headphones on. I paid cash for 1 hour. I sat at a terminal in the back corner. The keyboard was sticky. I navigated to my email provider. My fingers hovered over the keys. I felt a surge of nausea. What if he had changed the password? It would be the smart move, the secure move. But Kevin was arrogant. He thought I was helpless. He thought I was just Dad, the man who couldn't figure out how to program the DVR. He didn't realize that I knew the password because I was the one who reminded him of it every time he forgot. I typed it in. Mustang 67. Loading. The inbox appeared. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I scanned the list. Unread messages from suppliers. Spam. Notifications. And there it was. In the sent folder. From Kevin Miller to Apex Auto Group. Sterling J. Subject. Finalizing the acquisition. I clicked it. My hand trembled on the mouse. The cursor shook. "Mr. Sterling, my father has agreed to step down immediately due to rapidly declining health. As discussed, I am authorized to act on his behalf. I am prepared to sign the final deed transfer this Friday at 5:00 p.m. EST. The purchase price of $2.5 million is approved. Please have the wire instructions ready. Kevin, Friday. Today was Tuesday. I did the mental math the way I used to calculate gear ratios. Rome is 6 hours ahead of Ohio. I had 3 days, 72 hours, 3 days to cross an ocean without a passport. 3 days to get back to Ohio. 3 days to stop the sale. If I went to the U.S. Embassy, it would take days to verify my identity. They would call my emergency contact. They would call Kevin. I saw another email in the sent folder. This one was dated yesterday. To U.S. State Department, Bureau of Consular Affairs. Subject: Missing Person Report. Robert Miller. I opened it. It was like reading my own obituary. My father, Robert Miller, suffers from early onset dementia. He became confused and wandered away from me at Fiumicino Airport. He is likely disoriented and aggressive. Please detain him for his own safety and contact me immediately. The room spun. He had inoculated them. He had planted the seed. If I walked into the embassy, or a police station, or a hospital, they wouldn't see a victim. They would see a senile old man having an episode. They would detain me. They would sedate me. And they would call Kevin to come rescue me. He would fly back, look concerned, sign the papers to commit me to a home, and the sale would go through. He would win. He would lock me away in a sterile room with a view of a parking lot. And he would bulldoze my life's work. I needed to move in the shadows. I needed to disappear from the grid entirely. I needed Paul. The phone call. I found a payphone outside a pizzeria that smelled of burning dough. It was an ancient relic, covered in graffiti. I dialed the number. I knew it by heart. I hadn't called it in 5 years, but some numbers are etched into your brain like a VIN number on a chassis. Ring, ring, ring. Yeah? The voice sounded like gravel tumbling in a cement mixer. Paul, it's Robert. Silence. Long, heavy silence. I could hear the background noise on his end. The whine of a crane, the clang of metal on metal. Paul ran a salvage yard in New Jersey. Paulie's Scrap and Salvage. He dealt in things that were broken, discarded, and lost. Robert? Paul asked, his tone shifting. I thought you were in Italy, eating pasta. Kevin posted a picture of you two at the Vatican yesterday. Said you were having the time of your life. Kevin left me, Paul. I said it plain. No sugarcoating. You don't sugarcoat it when a piston blows through the block. He stole my passport. He stranded me at the airport. He's selling the shop on Friday at 5 p.m. He what? The gravel turned to steel. That little punk, Paul hissed. I never liked him. Always had shifty eyes. Always looked at your tools like he was calculating their pawn value. I need a way home, Paul. No planes. No customs. He'll be watching the manifests. The State Department thinks I'm missing, and senile. Paul paused. I heard the distinctive flick hiss of a Zippo lighter, then a long exhale. He was thinking. Paul was a CB with me 40 years ago. We built bridges while people shot at us. We fixed trucks with duct tape and prayer. He solved problems. I got a container ship leaving Naples tonight, Paul said, carrying auto parts and recycled electronics to Newark. It's one of mine. The captain owes me a life debt. Naples, I said. That's 3 hours south. It's not first class, Bobby. Paul warned. It's a rust bucket. It's going to be rough. I don't need first class, I said, staring at my reflection in the dirty phone booth glass. I need to be there by Friday morning. Get to the port in Naples by midnight. Look for a ship named the Iron Lady. Ask for Captain Russo. Show him your Navy tattoo. The one on your forearm. Thanks, Paul. Don't thank me yet, he growled. Just get home and kick his ass. I hung up. I had a target. Naples, midnight. But getting there wasn't going to be easy. Trains required ID for tickets sometimes. Buses were slow. I went back to the hostel. The van ride Marco was still at the desk, watching the second half of the game. I need a ride to the train station, I said, leaning on the counter. Marco didn't look away from the screen. Taxi? No, I need a friend. Someone who drives fast, doesn't talk, and doesn't ask for a passport. I put another $100 bill on the counter. Marco's eyes left the soccer game. He looked at the bill, then at me. He grinned, and a gold tooth flashed in the dim light. My cousin, he said. He has a delivery van. He goes south tonight. Mozzarella and illegal cigarettes. Call minutes later, a white Fiat van pulled up to the curb. It was battered, rusted around the wheel wells, and sounded like it was running on 3 cylinders. It smelled intensely of cheese and diesel fuel. The driver was a man named Luca. He was thick-necked, balding, and didn't speak a word of English. I climbed into the passenger seat. The upholstery was torn, bleeding yellow foam. We hit the highway as the sun began to set. The sky turned a bruised purple, then black. Luca drove like a madman, weaving through traffic, tailgating trucks, honking at shadows. I stared out the window at the Italian countryside blurring by. I thought about Ashley. I remembered when she first met Kevin. She was sweet then. Too sweet. She brought me cookies. Store-bought, but put on a nice plate. She asked about my wife, Martha, who had passed 5 years before. "It must be so lonely in that big house, Robert," she had said. "Have you ever thought about downsizing? Maybe a condo? Somewhere with less maintenance?" I had thought she was being kind. Now I realized she was appraising the real estate. She wasn't looking at a home. She was looking at an asset class. Was it all a age-con? The marriage? The grandchildren they kept promising, but never delivered? It was all structural fatigue, hidden under a fresh coat of paint. The van sputtered. We were on a dark stretch of highway somewhere between Rome and Naples. No streetlights, just the endless dark of olive groves and vineyards. Luca pulled over onto the gravel shoulder. The engine died with a shudder. "Problem?" I asked, pointing to the dashboard. Luca didn't answer. He turned around in his seat. He reached under his seat and pulled out a tire iron. It was rusted, heavy. "Money," he said. It was the only English word he knew. He pointed to my pocket. He knew I had cash. Marco must have told him. "The American has rolls of bills. He has no passport. He is nobody." I sighed. A deep, weary sigh that rattled in my chest. I was 70 years old. My knees were shot. My back was a road map of microfractures. My hearing wasn't what it used to be, but my hands? My hands were strong. They were hands that could torque a bolt to 100 foot-pounds. Hands that could feel a hairline fracture in steel just by touch. "Don't do this, son," I said softly. Luca lunged. It was clumsy, swung the iron in a wide telegraphed arc, aiming for my head. I didn't try to dodge. I didn't have the speed. I moved inside the swing. I leaned forward, into the danger zone. My left hand caught his wrist. My right hand clamped onto his thumb and the meat of his palm. The mechanic's grip. It wasn't a martial arts move. It was physics. It was leverage. I twisted. I applied torque to the joint, rotating the radius and ulna bones against each other until they locked. Then I pushed his thumb back toward his wrist. Luca screamed. It was a high, wet sound. The tire iron clattered to the floor of the van. I didn't let go. I twisted harder, leaning my body weight into it, driving his face down into the steering wheel. Honk. The horn blared into the silence of the night. "I fix things," I whispered into his ear, my voice trembling with adrenaline, "but I also know how to take them apart." I pressed his face harder into the plastic wheel. I could feel him sobbing. "Drive," I said. He didn't understand. I released the pressure slightly, just enough so he could breathe, but kept his wrist locked. I pointed through the windshield at the dark road ahead. "Naples," I commanded. "Naples, now." He nodded frantically. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the grime. I let him go. I picked up the tire iron and set it on my lap. I sat back. "And fix that knock in the engine," I muttered. "It's your fuel injector." He drove. He didn't look at me again. He drove with 2 hands on the wheel, terrified, staring straight ahead. I watched the road. My heart was racing, but my hands, my old, scarred hands, were steady. I still had it. The van screeched to a halt at the edge of the commercial shipping zone. The brakes squealed, a high-pitched protest of worn pads against warped rotors. "Napoli," Luca whispered. He didn't unlock the doors. He just stared straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He was terrified of me. I opened the door and stepped out. The air here was different than Rome. It was heavier. It tasted of salt spray, rotting seaweed, and heavy bunker fuel. It was the smell of industry, of commerce that moved in the dark. I watched the van peel away, tires spinning on the wet cobblestones. I was alone again. The port was a labyrinth of stacked shipping containers, towering 40 feet high like a city of steel blocks. Massive cranes loomed overhead, their skeletal arms silhouetted against the moonlight like dormant dinosaurs. Shadows stretched long and deep between the rows. I walked toward the water. My knee was throbbing with a dull, insistent rhythm, but the adrenaline from the van kept me moving. I found Pier 9, and there she was. The Iron Lady, she wasn't a sleek vessel. She was a rust bucket, a Panamax-class cargo ship that had seen better decades. Her hull was streaked with oxidation, bleeding orange tears down the black paint. She sat low in the water, heavy with cargo. She groaned as the tide shifted, the steel plating creaking against the rubber dock bumpers. To anyone else, she looked like a floating wreck. To me, she looked like a chariot. I walked up the gangway. It vibrated under my boots. A sailor stepped out of the shadows at the top. He was holding a flashlight, the beam cutting into my eyes. "No passengers," he growled in broken English. He had a face like a crumpled map, and a cigarette dangling from his lip. "I'm not a passenger," I said, shielding my eyes. "I'm here for Russo. Tell him Paul sent the ghost." The sailor hesitated. The name Paul carried weight, even across an ocean. He lowered the light. "Wait."
5 minutes later, a man appeared on the deck.
Captain Russo. He was shorter than I expected, but wide-built, like a fire hydrant. He had a thick gray beard and skin that looked like cured leather. He wore a grease-stained wool sweater despite the heat. He looked me up and down. He saw the red shirt now ruined, the work boots, the way I stood, feet apart, bracing for a roll that hadn't started yet. "You are Robert?" he asked. His voice sounded like rocks, grinding together. "Paul says you are Trouble. I'm a mechanic," I corrected, "and I need a ride to Newark." "This is not a cruise ship, American. We do not have stewards. We do not have bingo." "I don't play bingo," I said. I rolled up my right sleeve. My forearm was corded with muscle that hadn't faded with age. There, faded to a dull navy blue, was the ink I'd gotten in 1971. The Seabees emblem. The bee, with the machine gun, and the wrench. Construmus. Batuemus. We build, we fight. Russo leaned in. He squinted at the tattoo. Then he pulled down the collar of his sweater. On his collarbone, a faded anchor. Navy, Italian Navy, or Merchant Marine. It didn't matter. It was the same language. He nodded, a silent accord between men who knew what it meant to keep things running when the world was falling apart. "You sleep in crew quarters," Russo said. "Bunk 6. It smells like diesel and sweat. You work for food. You work for passage. No free rides on the Iron Lady." "I can work," I said. "Put me in the engine room." Russo raised an eyebrow. "The engine room is 110 degrees. It is loud. It kills young men." "I'm not young," I said. "I'm seasoned." Russo huffed, a sound that might have been a laugh. "We leave in 20 minutes. If you die, we throw you overboard. No paperwork. Deal. The crossing, day 1 and 2. The Atlantic Ocean is not a flat blue surface. It is a living, breathing monster that wants to swallow you whole. The first 2 days were a descent into hell. The engine room of the Iron Lady was a cavern of steel and noise. It was a cathedral of power. The main engine was a massive diesel unit, 3 stories tall. The pistons, the size of oil drums, pounding out a rhythm that shook your teeth in your skull. Thum, 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 thum. It was deafening. We wore ear protection, but you could feel the sound in your chest. It became your heartbeat. The heat was oppressive. It was a wet, oily heat that coated your skin in seconds. I stripped down to a borrowed gray jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. I tied the sleeves around my waist. I grabbed a rag and a wrench. The crew, mostly Filipino and Italian men half my age, ignored me at first. They called me no, Grandpa. They smirked when I struggled to climb the steep metal ladders. But the smirks vanished on the second day. I found a pressure valve on the auxiliary cooling line that was hissing. It had been leaking for weeks, judging by the rust streaks. The chief engineer, a frantic man named Giorgio, had been trying to patch it with tape. I tapped Giorgio on the shoulder. I didn't speak. I couldn't over the noise. I pointed to the valve. I took a soda can from the trash bin. I pulled out my pocket knife, thankfully still in my pocket. Forgotten by Kevin because he never considered a knife a tool, only a weapon. I cut a shim from the aluminum can. I loosened the flange bolts. I slid the aluminum into the gap. I tightened the bolts in a star pattern. Torque, release, torque again. The hissing stopped. Giorgio looked at the valve. Then he looked at me. He nodded. Respect. I wasn't Nano anymore. I was the ghost. I worked until my hands were black with grease. It filled the cracks in my skin. It hid the liver spots. It hid the tremors. In the engine room, I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a father whose son had betrayed him. I was a part of the machine. Simple, logical. If something is broken, you fix it. If a bolt is loose, you tighten it. At night, I collapsed into a bunk that smelled of mildew. The vibration of the ship rocked me, but I couldn't sleep. I stared at the rusted rivets in the ceiling. I thought about Kevin. I remembered him at 16. He had crashed his first car, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd bought him to learn on. He had called me from a ditch, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, don't kill me." I hadn't killed him. I hadn't even yelled. I drove out, winched the car out of the ditch, and hugged him. "It's just metal, Kev," I had said. "Metal can be fixed. People can't." I realized now, lying in the dark, that I had taught him the wrong lesson. I taught him that consequences could be fixed by someone else. I taught him that Daddy would always come with the winch. He wasn't evil then. He was just weak. But weakness, left unchecked, rots. It turns into malice. He wanted the shop not because he loved cars, but because he wanted the money without the grease. He wanted the throne without the sword. "It's your fault." The anger returned, cold and sharp. It cut through the exhaustion. "You're right, Kevin. It is my fault. I built you. Now I have to dismantle you." The storm, day 3. On the third night, the weather turned. The ship pitched violently. The floor dropped out from under us, then slammed back up. Tools skittered across the steel grating. I was in the lower hold, near the engine room intake, checking the hydraulic lines with a young deckhand named Salty Sal. He was a kid, maybe 22, with one eye that wandered in a nervous laugh. The ship groaned, a sound like a dying whale, then crash. The sound was explosive. A securing chain in the cargo bay next to us snapped. The tension had been too high. A stack of crates, heavy wooden pallets loaded with auto parts, toppled over. "Look out!" I screamed. I shoved Sal out of the way. I wasn't fast enough to clear the zone myself. But I rolled. The crates smashed into the bulkhead. Dust and splinters filled the air. Then came the scream. It wasn't me. It was another sailor. Enzo. He had been behind the stack. I scrambled up. The emergency lights flickered, casting the hold in a spinning red glow. Enzo was pinned. A crate weighing at least 1,000 pounds had landed on his lower legs. He was thrashing, screaming in Italian, his eyes wide with animal terror. The other men froze. Panic. It's a paralyzing agent. They looked at the crate, then at the door. They wanted to run. "Get him out," Sal yelled. But he didn't move. I looked at the crate. It was too heavy to lift, even for 3 men. "The jack," I roared. My voice wasn't the voice of an old man. It was the voice of a chief petty officer. "Get the hydraulic floor jack." Now, the command snapped them out of it. Sal scrambled toward the tool locker. I ran to Enzo. I grabbed his hand. "Look at me," I yelled over the roar of the storm. "Enzo, look at me." He focused on me, tears streaming down his face. "My legs?" No, my legs." "I got you, son. Breathe." Sal came back, dragging the heavy red jack. "It won't fit," Sal cried. "The gap is too small. We can't get the jack under the crate." He was right. The crate was flush with the floor. There was no leverage point. I looked around. My eyes landed on a pry bar mounted on the wall. 5 feet of solid tempered steel. "Give me the bar," I ordered. I jammed the tip of the pry bar into the microscopic seam between the crate and the steel deck. "When I lift, you slide the jack in," I told Sal. "You have 1 second." "Do you understand?" "You can't lift that," Sal stammered. "It's a ton." I don't need to lift it, I gritted out. I just need to make an inch. I planted my feet. My bad knees screamed in protest. I wedged my shoulder under the end of the bar. I closed my eyes. I thought of the shop. I thought of the thousands of engines I had lifted. I thought of Kevin's face when he signed that note. Now! I pushed. Every muscle in my back seized. I felt something pop near my spine, a hot, tearing sensation. My vision went white at the edges. But the bar moved. The crate groaned. It rose. Half an inch. An inch. Go! Commander? Call and tell. Click the jack underneath. He pumped the handle frantically. Clank, clank, clank. The hydraulics took over. The crate lifted. Enzo scrambled backward, dragging his crushed legs free. I let go of the bar. I collapsed against the bulkhead, sliding down to the cold metal floor. My chest was heaving. My vision was swimming with black spots. My back felt like it was on fire. Captain Russo appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene. The toppled crates, the weeping boy, the jack, and me, slumped in a pile of grease and sweat. He walked over to me. The ship listed again, but he stood like a statue. He reached down and offered me a hand. I took it. He pulled me up. I stifled a groan. You are strong for an old man, Russo said. He wasn't smiling. He was looking at me with something deeper than respect. I wiped the grease and sweat from my eyes. I stood up straight, despite the pain. I'm not old, Captain, I grunted, spitting a mixture of blood and bile onto the deck. I'm just well seasoned. Russo nodded. He took a cigar from his pocket and handed it to me. We dock in Newark in 30 hours, he said. Get some sleep, Ghost. You have a war to fight. I took the cigar. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I was ready. The sky was the color of a wet bruise. A relentless, freezing drizzle fell from the dark clouds, slicking the concrete of the dock and turning the shipping containers into glistening monoliths. The Iron Lady docked with a heavy, mournful groan of steel against rubber. The gangway lowered. I walked down. My legs were stiff. My back ached with a deep, grinding pain from the incident with the crate, and my ears were still ringing from the deafening thrum of the engine room. I was covered in 3 days of grease, salt, and sweat. I looked like a man who had been chewed up by the machinery of the world and spat out. But I was home. At the end of the pier, a single car was idling. A back sedan, its exhaust puffing white clouds into the cold air. A figure leaned against the hood, a glowing cherry of a cigar illuminating his face. Paulie hadn't changed much in 40 years. He was still built like a vending machine, square, solid, and immovable. He wore a canvas jacket that had seen better decades and a flat cap pulled low. I limped toward. The rain felt good. It felt like a baptism. It washed the Mediterranean salt from my skin. Paul straightened up as I approached. He took the cigar out of his mouth and looked me over. He took in the ruined linen shirt, the grease-stained trousers, the limp, the dark circles under my eyes that looked like bruises. You look like you fell out of a grinder, Bobby, he said, his voice gravelly and warm. I feel like it, I rasped. How's the traffic? At 4 a.m.? It's a dream, but the timeline is tight. You got 13 hours. I can make it, I said. Paul opened the back door of the sedan. I didn't bring this car for you. I brought that one. He pointed to the shadows of a nearby warehouse. Parked there, rumbling with a low, predatory idle, was a 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle SS. Midnight blue with white racing stripes. It was a beast of a car. A relic from an era when cars were made of steel and anger. A 72, I asked, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. 44 big block, Paul said. No GPS, no OnStar, no tracking chips, just carburetor and spark plugs. I pulled it from an estate sale last month, tuned it myself. Does it run straight? Like an arrow, and it's got plates from a truck that was scrapped in '98. You're a ghost, Robert. I walked over to the Chevelle. I ran my hand over the hood. It was cold, vibrating with power. It felt familiar. It felt like a weapon. One more thing, Paul said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila folder. He handed it to me. The paper was damp from the rain. I did some digging, like you asked. Kevin. I took the folder. My stomach tightened. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to believe my son was just greedy. I wanted to believe he was just entitled. "What is it?" I asked. Paul took a long drag of his cigar. "It's not just the shop, Bobby. It's everything. Your house, your savings, even your life insurance policy. He forged your signature on a loan modification 6 months ago. Why?" The word came out choked. "Why would he do that?" "Gambling," Paul said. He spat a piece of tobacco on the ground. "Online sports betting, crypto, high-stakes poker tables in Cleveland. The kid has the sickness, Robert. He's in a hole so deep he can't see the sky." "How much?" "He owes $500,000 to a loan shark named Eddie Vargas. They call him Slick Eddie. He operates out of a dive bar called the Blue Pit on the edge of town."
$500,000.
The number hit me harder than the tire iron in Italy. Kevin wasn't just a trader, he was desperate. He was a drowning man, grabbing onto the only life raft he could find, my life's work, and dragging it down with him. "If he doesn't sell the shop today," Paul said quietly, "he's a dead man. Eddie doesn't sue people, he breaks them." I gripped the folder until the paper crinkled. "Thanks, Paul." "Don't thank me," Paul said. He opened the driver's door of the Chevelle for me. "Go get him, and if you need to bury a body, you know where my yard is." "I'm not going to bury him," I said, sliding into the leather bucket seat. The smell of old vinyl and gasoline filled my nose. "I'm going to fix him." I turned the key. The 44 engine roared to life, a thunderclap that echoed off the shipping containers. "Go to work, Ghost," Paul said, slapping the roof. I dropped the car into gear. The tires chirped on the wet pavement. I sped out of the port, leaving the ocean behind. I headed west, toward Ohio, toward the reckoning. Interstate 88, Pennsylvania. The drive was 500 miles. 5 hours, if I pushed it. The Chevelle ate the asphalt. I kept the speedometer pinned at 85. The rain stopped as I crossed into Pennsylvania, replaced by a gray, overcast gloom that matched my mood. The landscape changed. The industrial coast gave way to rolling hills, then to the rusting skeletons of the steel belt. Abandoned factories, towns that had seen better days. It was a landscape of things that had been used up and left behind. Just like me, I didn't turn on the radio. I listened to the engine. I listened for a miss, a ping, a rattle. There was none. Paul was a good mechanic. My mind replayed the memories of Kevin. The time he won the Little League championship. The time he graduated college. The way he looked at me when I gave him the keys to the shop for the weekend. "I won't let you down, Dad." He had said it with such sincerity. When did the lie start? Was it gradual? A slow leak in the gasket? Or did the block crack all at once? I realized then that grief is just love with nowhere to go. And my love was turning into fuel. 11 ASM, Ohio border. I needed to change. I looked like a vagrant. I smelled like a bilge pump. If I walked into the shop like this, they would call security. They would call the asylum. I pulled into a truck stop just outside of Youngstown. I went into the bathroom. The fluorescent lights hummed, flickering green and yellow. I looked in the mirror. The face staring back was a stranger. Gray stubble covered my jaw. My eyes were bloodshot, sunken deep into the sockets. My skin was pale. I washed my face with the harsh pink soap from the dispenser. I bought a disposable razor and a can of shaving cream from the vending machine. I shaved in the sink. I scraped away the gray stubble. I scraped away the exhaustion. I nicked my chin. "I didn't have an episode, Jim," I said, sitting down in the hard plastic chair. I placed the manila folder Paul had given me on his desk. I was discarded. Anderson looked at me. He looked at the clean shave, the cheap but neat suit, the steady hands. He didn't see dementia. He saw rage, cold and controlled. "Talk to me," he said. I laid it all out. The VAT refund lie, the passport theft, the canceled ticket, the email regarding the sale, the gambling debts to Slick Eddie. I handed him the receipt from the coffee shop. The one with Kevin's handwriting. The smoking gun. Anderson read the note. His jaw tightened. The veins in his neck stood out. "You have no resources. You're an old man. Just stay there." "This is kidnapping," Anderson said, his voice low and dangerous. "Constructive abandonment of a vulnerable adult. Fraud. Grand larceny. He looked up at the clock. He's selling the shop today at 5,000. That's the plan, I said. We can pick him up now, Anderson said, reaching for his radio. I can have a cruiser at the shop in 5 minutes. We'll drag him out in cuffs. No, I said. I put a hand on his forearm to stop him. Anderson looked at me, surprised. If you arrest him now, I said, he'll claim it was a misunderstanding. He'll say he thought I was sick. He'll say he was in my best interest. He'll lawyer up, and he'll walk. He might even still try to claim power of attorney. So what do you want to do? I want to catch him in the act, I said. I want the fraud to be complete. I want him to sign that paper. I want the money to transfer. I want the crime to be irreversible. Anderson hesitated. That's risky, Robert. Once that deed is signed. Once it's signed, it's a felony, I interrupted, and I'll be there to stop the check from clearing. I leaned forward. I need you to be outside the shop at 4:55 p.m. Unmarked cars. Wait for my signal. What's the signal? The noise, I said grimly. When the truth hits the fan, you'll hear it. Anderson studied my face for a long moment. He saw the resolve. He nodded slowly. Okay, Robert, we'll be there. But be careful. If he's desperate enough to leave you in Italy, he's desperate enough to do anything. I know, I said. I raised Robert's auto and body, 4:30 p.m. Said 8 p.m. I parked the Chevelle 3 blocks away, down a side street lined with maple trees that were just starting to turn orange. I walked the rest of the way. The sky was darkening, heavy gray clouds rolling in again. The air was cool. I approached the shop from the rear alley. The building stood silhouetted against the twilight. It was a large brick structure I had bought 30 years ago. I knew every brick. I knew where the roof leaked in heavy storms. I knew which floorboards in the office creaked. It looked different today. Alien. There was a sleek black Mercedes parked near the back entrance. Sterling's car. The vultures were circling. I crouched behind a dumpster filled with scrap metal. The smell of oil and old tires wafted over me. It was the smell of my life. I peered around the corner. Kevin had hired security. A young kid in a uniform that was too big for him was standing by the rear door, scrolling on his phone. He looked bored. He wasn't a professional. He was window dressing. I picked up a heavy lug nut from the ground near the dumpster. I threw it hard, aiming for a stack of metal drums on the far side of the alley, away from the door. Clang, rattle, crash. The noise echoed in the narrow space. The kid jumped. He pocketed his phone and walked cautiously toward the noise to investigate. Hello? He called out. I moved. I slipped out from behind the dumpster. I moved fast for a man with bad knees. I reached the side door, the one that led directly into the parts storage room. It was locked. I didn't panic. I reached into my shoe, under the new insole I had bought at the truck stop. I pulled out a small flat piece of metal, a master key. I had filed it myself 20 years ago. It opened every door in the building. Kevin didn't know it existed. He relied on the electronic key fobs he had installed last year. He forgot that electronics fail, but mechanical systems endure. I slid the key into the lock. It felt gritty. Click. The tumbler turned. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The infiltration. I was inside. The darkness was complete, save for the thin strips of light coming from under the hallway door. The smell hit me harder here. Valvoline. Degreaser. Coffee. It broke my heart. This was my cathedral, and it was being desecrated. I moved through the racks of mufflers and brake pads. I was a ghost in my own machine. I reached the door to the main hallway. I cracked it open, and in. I saw Brenda, my secretary of 15 years. She was standing at her desk in the hallway, packing a cardboard box. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying silently. The door to the main office, my office, was open. Kevin was standing in the doorway, his back to me. He was wearing that expensive linen blazer. I'm sorry, Brenda, Kevin said. His voice was smooth, fake. The new owners want a clean slate, operational efficiency. You understand, but Robert promised me this job until I retired, Brenda sobbed, clutching a framed photo of her grandchildren. He said I was family. Robert isn't here, Kevin said. His voice dropped, becoming cold and hard. And frankly, Brenda, he wasn't running a business. He was running a charity. Now get your things and get out. You're making a scene. My blood boiled. It was a physical sensation. Heat rushing to my face. He wasn't just hurting me, he was hurting the people I protected. He was kicking a 60-year-old woman to the curb to save a few percentage points on a spreadsheet. I wanted to burst out then. I wanted to tear him apart. But I held back. Not yet. Wait for the signature. Kevin turned and went back into the office. Closing the door, I waited for Brenda to leave. She walked down the hall, weeping, carrying her box. The back door clicked shut. Silence. I crept into the hallway. I looked up at the corner, the security camera. Kevin had installed it to watch the employees. I reached up with my pocket knife. I sliced the wire. The red light on the camera died. I moved to the storage closet that shared a wall with the main office. It was a small space, filled with filing cabinets and old tax records. I stepped inside and pulled the door shut, leaving it unlatched. The walls here were thin drywall. I had meant to insulate them years ago, but never got around to it. Now that procrastination was my tactical advantage. I could hear everything. The listening post? Gentlemen, Kevin's voice came through the wall, muffled but clear. Thank you for coming. I know this has been a difficult week. We're sorry to hear about Robert, a sleek baritone voice said. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Apex Auto. Is it true he's gone? His mind is gone, Kevin said. He put a tragic tremble in his voice. It was a performance. He doesn't know who he is. He's wandering the streets of Rome. We have investigators looking, but the doctors say even if we find him, he'll never be the same. Early onset dementia, aggressive progression. I clenched my fists in the dark. My nails dug into my palms. Liar, you soulless liar. That's tragic, Sterling said. Truly, but business must continue. Exactly, Kevin said. That's what he would have wanted, to secure the legacy. And you have the authority, another voice asked. Probably the lawyer. Right here, Kevin said. I heard the rustle of paper, medical power of attorney. Signed and notarized last year, and the deed transfer documents. I am the acting executor of the estate. And the purchase price? $2.5 million. Agreed, Kevin said, provided the wire is initiated immediately upon signing. The funds are in escrow, Sterling said. One signature, and they release. And the building? Kevin asked. What are your plans for the physical plant? There was a pause. We're leveling it, Sterling said casually. Bulldozers come Monday. We're putting up a multi-level parking deck for the stadium district. The land is worth more than the shop. My breath caught in my throat. A parking deck. 40 years of blood, sweat, and busted knuckles. The place where I taught Kevin to change his first tire. The place where I fixed the widow Johnson's car for free, because she couldn't afford it. Flattened, erased, for a parking lot. Fine, Kevin said. No hesitation, no sentimentality. Just give me the pen. I heard the sound, scritch, scratch, the sound of a pen dragging across high-quality paper. The sound of my life being sold off. Done, Kevin sighed. It's done. Excellent, Sterling said. I'm confirming the wire now. Sent. The money should be in your account in minutes. Thank God, Kevin whispered. I heard the desperation in it. He was thinking of Slick Eddie. He was thinking he had survived. Not quite, I whispered to the darkness. I checked my watch. 5:02 p.m. The deed was signed. The wire was sent. The crime was complete. I put my hand on the doorknob of the closet. I straightened my tie. I smoothed my jacket. I wasn't a fugitive anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was the judgment. I stepped out of the closet and walked 2 paces to the office door. I didn't knock. I raised my boot, the heavy work boot that had walked through Rome, through Naples, through the Atlantic Ocean, and I kicked the door just below the lock. Bang. The door flew open, slamming against the interior wall with a thunderous crash that shook the dust from the ceiling tiles. The echo of the door slamming against the wall hung in the air like gunshot smoke. For a heartbeat, time suspended. Kevin jumped out of his leather chair as if he'd been electrocuted. His face, flushed with the triumph of the signed deal a second ago, drained of color instantly. It went past pale. It went gray, the color of wet ash. Ashley, sitting on the corner of the desk, dropped her designer purse. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mr. Sterling and the two lawyers from Apex spun around in their chairs. They saw a man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, with knuckles scarred from a lifetime of labor and eyes that burned the cold, terrifying intelligence. They didn't see a dementia patient. They saw a reckoning. "Dad?" Kevin's voice was a squeak. A high, broken sound that didn't belong to a 32-year-old man in a linen blazer. He backed up until his legs hit the heavy mahogany desk. He gripped the edge of it, his knuckles white. "You're in Rome," Kevin stammered, his eyes darting from me to the window as if checking if the laws of physics had broken. "You're sick. You don't know where you are." I walked into the room. One step, two steps. The floorboards creaked under my boots, the heavy work boots that poked out from under the dress pants. "I know exactly where I am," I said. My voice was low, steady, and filled the room without shouting. "I'm in the office. I built a night. I'm standing on the floor. And I'm looking at a son who just sold me out for a parking lot." "Security," Ashley screamed, finding her voice. It was shrill, panicked. "Get him out. He's crazy. He's having an episode." She lunged for the phone in the desk. "I wouldn't do that," I said. I didn't move to stop her. I just looked at her. She froze. There was something in my posture, a density, a gravity, that pinned her in place. I walked to the desk. I picked up the contract. The ink was still wet. I looked at the signature. "Kevin Miller." "You signed it," I said softly. "You actually did it." I hoped. Right up until the sound of the pen scratching, that you wouldn't, but you did. "Dad, listen," Kevin said, holding up his hands. They were shaking violently. "I did it for us. The business is failing. I saved us. You don't understand the market. The business made a profit of $212,000 last year," I recited. "I know the books, Kevin. I know every receipt. I know every invoice." I dropped the contract onto the desk. It landed with a slap. "I also know about the other books," I said, locking eyes with him. "I know about the $500,000 you owe to Eddie Vargas." Kevin flinched as if I had slapped him. His eyes widened, terrified. You spoke to Eddie?" he whispered. "I sat in his booth 2 hours ago," I said. "I looked him in the eye. I cleaned up your mess, Kevin. Again, just like I fixed the Honda Civic when you were 16. Kevin slumped. The air went out of him. The arrogant businessman dissolved, leaving behind a scared, desperate child. "But this time," I continued, my voice hardening, "I'm not pulling you out of the ditch." Mr. Sterling stood up. He smoothed his tie, looking nervous. "Mr. Miller," Sterling said, using his boardroom voice, "if there is a familial dispute regarding the equity—" "There is no dispute," I said. "This sale is fraud. The power of attorney was for medical decisions only, and it was contingent on incapacitation. As you can see, I am quite capable." "He's not," Kevin yelled, suddenly rallying. Desperation made him vicious. "He's senile. He wrote me a note. He doesn't know what he's saying." "The note," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the crumpled thermal receipt, the one that had traveled 4,000 miles with me. I tossed it onto the mahogany table. "It's your fault." Mr. Sterling picked it up. He read the frantic scrawl on the back. He read the cruel, dismissive words of a son abandoning his father. "You have no resources. You're an old man. Just stay there." Sterling looked up. He looked at Kevin with unfiltered disgust. "Even a corporate shark has a code, and leaving your father to rot in a foreign airport violated it." "You left him?" Sterling asked, his voice quiet. "You stranded him at Fiumicino to steal his company?" "It's a forgery!" Kevin screamed, sweat pouring down his face. "He wrote it himself. He's demented. He's trying to frame me." "Is he?" I nodded toward the hallway. "Come in, Jim." Detective Anderson walked through the door. He was followed by 2 uniformed officers. The glint of badges under the fluorescent lights was the brightest thing in the room. The air in the office changed instantly. It went from a business meeting to a crime scene. "Kevin Miller," Ashley Miller, Anderson said, his voice flat and official. You are under arrest for fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit grand larceny, and constructive abandonment. Ashley let out a sob and covered her mouth. The handcuffs clicked onto her wrists first. She looked at me, pleading. Robert, please. I didn't want to. He made me. I looked away. You tapped your foot, Ashley. You checked your watch. You were in on the timeline. Kevin didn't surrender. He looked at the officers. He looked at the contract on the desk, his lifeline, his salvation from Slick Eddie. He saw it slipping away. He saw the prison bars. He saw the end of his life. The panic is a dangerous fuel. No, Kevin screamed. I'm not going to jail. I'm not. He grabbed the heavy brass paperweight from the desk, a model of a V8 engine I had given him when he graduated business school. He raised it. He lunged at me, my own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders at the state fair, raising a weapon against me. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I didn't raise my hands to defend myself. I just looked at him. I looked him deep in the soul, and in that split second, I saw him hesitate. I saw the horror in his own eyes at what he was doing, but he was already in motion. An officer tackled him from the blind side. Wham! They hit the file cabinets together. The metal drawers dented with a loud crunch. The paperweight flew from Kevin's hand and skittered across the floor, spinning to a halt at my feet. Kevin lay pinned on the cheap carpet, gasping, sobbing. Dad, he cried out. It was a primal sound. Dad, help me, please. They'll kill me in prison. Dad, please. I looked down at him. I felt a crack in my heart, so wide and deep I thought it would kill me right there. The instinct to protect him was overwhelming. It was biological. It was 40 years of habit. I wanted to kneel down. I wanted to tell the officers it was a mistake. I wanted to write a check to Slick Eddie. I wanted to fix it. But then I looked at the contract. I looked at Brenda, who was standing in the doorway now, clutching her box, eyes wide with terror. And I looked at the note on the table. It's your fault. I took a breath. It rattled in my chest. You're right, Kevin, I said softly. The room went silent to hear me. It is my fault. I protected you from the world for too long. I never let you feel the consequences of your actions. I fixed every dent. I paid every fine. I made you weak. I looked at Detective Anderson. I nodded. Take him. Dad! No! Dad! They dragged him out. He fought them, kicking and screaming, a man-child throwing a tantrum against the weight of the law. Ashley was led out behind him, weeping mascara tears. I stood in the silence of the office. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He looked pale. Mr. Miller, he said nervously, gathering his briefcase. Obviously, the deal is off. We had no idea. We acted in good faith. I turned my gaze to him. Get out, I said. He didn't argue. He ran. I was alone. I sat down in my leather chair. It felt cold. The office felt vast and empty. The victory was complete. I had saved the shop. I had saved my legacy. But I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I swiveled the chair and looked out the window at the parking lot. I watched the police cruiser lights flash, red and blue, reflecting off the wet pavement. I watched them put my son in the back seat. I put my head in my hands, and I wept. Not for the business, but for the boy who used to catch fireflies in the backyard. 6 months later, State Penitentiary, Chillicothe, Ohio. The visitation room smelled of industrial cleaner and hopelessness. It was a gray concrete box, divided by shatterproof glass. I sat on the metal stool. My knees still ached when it rained, but I was getting used to it. The door on the other side buzzed. Kevin walked in. He looked different. The soft edges of the expensive lifestyle were gone. He was thinner. His hair was cut short, almost shaved. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a small scar on his chin that hadn't been there before. He wore an orange jumpsuit. It fit him poorly. He sat down. He didn't meet my eyes at first. He picked up the phone receiver. I picked up mine. You came, he said. His voice was raspy. I'm your father, I said. I'll always show up. He looked down at his hands. They were rougher now. Laundry duty, he had told me in a letter. I hate it here, Dad, he whispered. I'm scared every day. I know, I said. It's a hard place. I'm sorry, he said. He looked up then. His eyes were wet. I'm so sorry. About Rome. About the shop. About everything. I was crazy. I was drowning. I looked at him. I searched for the lie. The manipulation. I saw regret. Real, deep regret. The kind that only comes when you hit the bottom of the well. But regret doesn't undo the past. It doesn't erase the signature on the fraud papers. It just shapes the future. You're up for parole in 18 months, I said. If you keep your nose clean, 18 months, he repeated. It sounded like a century. I don't know what I'll do. Who hires a felon with a fraud conviction? I can't go back to finance. I can't. I have nothing. You have hands, I said. He blinked. What? When you get out, I said, leaning closer to the glass. There's a job for you at the shop. Kevin's head snapped up. Hope, bright and painful, flooded his face. Manager, he asked. I have ideas about the inventory system. No. I cut him off. Janitor, the word hung in the air between us. Kevin stared at me. Janitor? You start at the bottom, I said firmly. Minimum wage. You sweep the floors. You clean the oil spills. You scrub the toilets. You learn what it means to work. You learn what the men and women who built that company actually do. I watched him. I waited for the flare of arrogance. I waited for him to say it was beneath him. For a moment, I saw the ghost of the old Kevin flicker in his eyes. The indignation, but then it died. He looked at his prison uniform. He looked at the armed guard by the door. He looked back at me. He nodded. Okay, he said, his voice trembling. Okay, I'll do it. I'll sweep the floors. Good, I said. Then we can start rebuilding. Thanks, Dad, he whispered. Don't thank me, I said. Work for it. The guard signaled that time was up. Goodbye, Kevin. Bye, Dad. I hung up the phone. The parking lot. I walked out into the sunlight. It was a crisp, clear autumn day. He handed it to me. I took the tool. It felt heavy, familiar. It worked smoothly now. Thanks, I said. Lunch is in 10, Kevin said. Brenda brought lasagna. I'll be there. I walked back toward my office. I looked at the wrench in my hand. It was old. It was scarred. It had been used and abused and lost. But it was clean, and it worked. I put it in my pocket. The rebuild was slow, but the engine was running.